So I'll try to explain what was in that graph, which you couldn't see on the course site. So we have our forest carbon stock. We have the years. Uh, then we can have another axis here for atmospheric carbon. So we assume this is our forest. We could start from zero, but I'd like to start from here. The forest is growing and accumulating biomass. As a young forest, young plants, it's growing, steeply growing, accumulating. After reaching maturity, the degree of accumulation gradually reduces. Now with forest management, we're saying that when we do some thinning, trimmings, we can improve the health of the forest, and this can also increase the productivity. So assuming, let's just randomly take, assuming at this point, what's this? Assuming at this point, we decide to carry out some thinning we decide to carry out some thinning operations in this forest. Let's assume that we decide that this is our baseline. We cannot go below this amount of biomass. So we harvest carry our thinnings, remove the excesses, overgrowth, so we can allow the forest regrow. So we're taking off this much biomass from the forest. The forest starts growing, maybe not this fast, but it grows. And it reaches a certain level, and we could decide to take out some more material, allow it grow, take out more materials, allow it grow. It's just a hypothetical thing. So each time we take out some material and allow the forest regrow. Now, if we draw another line here, we can make a comparison that if this forest was allowed to take its natural path at this time, let's say this time period, we'll find out that the biomass growth here, if we hadn't carried out this management operation, would be this much. Okay. But without operations, the growth is this much. And since growth depends on CO2 absorption from the atmosphere, the argument is that these management practices can be beneficial to the environment. So even though we're taking biomass out, we're absorbing more CO2 because the biomass now has an opportunity to grow, to regenerate itself, and it absorbs more CO2 to try to restore itself to the natural path it would have taken. Okay, so we have more CO2 absorbed, even though the forest biomass is lower than what would have been if it was taking its natural course. So now if this material that's taken out of here is not utilized, burned, or used for any process that releases CO2, then our materials are stored, let's say stored in some place where it's not decomposing, then there's no contribution to atmospheric nitrogen. If it was decomposing, left out and decomposing gradually, then would expect some contribution to atmospheric nitrogen, maybe not very high, because it's going to take time to degrade, decompose. Now, for bioenergy, if we take these materials out, we're not just storing them there, we're not just locking them there, we're not just keeping them. We want to use them for energy. And this energy, most of this energy, biomass energy processes, releases CO2. So what's happening is that if this biomass is burned or converted to fuel, which is eventually burned, we begin to release CO2 into the atmosphere. I'm not exact about how this curve will be, but the idea is that CO2, we're releasing CO2 into the atmosphere with each harvest or each utilization. So this would be for this axis. So the point we're making with carbon neutrality is at this point when nothing is released, that would have been a better case for carbon neutrality, because in the earlier video I shared with you, we're saying there should be no net CO2 release, and we have a lot of critics who really disagree with that definition of carbon neutrality, because CO2 release into the atmosphere, they argue, is CO2 released. So for biomass to make its argument, we don't want CO2 released, but that's not possible. But this is accumulated carbon, okay? So it's adding up, but with this graph, we're not looking at it as an accumulated carbon. So at this point, let's say this point, if this amount of carbon is utilized, let's say X, from this amount of what they call it, feedstock, say Y, that is harvested, then we'd know that the difference in this amount to this amount is what we need to account for. Okay, so when this difference is so big, of course, if this is the same scale, which I'm assuming, if this difference is so big, it means you've released just a very little amount of CO2 into the atmosphere compared to how much you've actually taken out of the forest. So if you have very little, the time to pay back, to make up, to bring this to zero, to bring this point to zero, is very little. And then when we go to this point, we keep increasing. We'll see that the time to pay back, the amount of CO2 released, is higher into the atmosphere. So you have more to do to get it down to this period, to zero, showing that we don't have CO2. So that will be the peak back period. So the closer this curve is, okay, let me see whether I can erase it. So the closer, assuming I drew it this way, oops. I should go back to my pen. So the closer this curve is, assuming we're using this, let's just use this. The closer this curve is to how much carbon stock was taken out of the forest, the longer the payback period, and the further the biomass energy is from carbon neutrality. So you're having so much carbon released into the atmosphere, very close to the amount taken um, forest, you will have a longer time to bring that amount down to this level. The further away it is from the curve, the shorter it is to pay the debt. So in the earlier slide I gave, I said typically people believe that carbon is really not neutral in its first year or second, and most likely within the third year, you're paying back your debt, you know. So that's basically what the slide you have on the cost side is saying. So I know I've not dealt with everything on that slide, but this is the graph that some of you, maybe not exactly, but the idea conveyed in that graph which you couldn't see. I hope this helps.